What would you say if I tell you that the word temporary and permanent are synonyms? If you really think it well, maybe in some points you have done or taken something temporary, but then it became permanent. If we talk about something so sensitive like your home security, would you give your home's keys to every person that needs to do some activities like construction, maintenance, cleaning, just because they need to do some activities at your home one time? I know you will be thinking many times before doing that. Another way to do that will be to give them temporary access under your approval and supervising all the activities that they are doing. This is what happens in most of the organizations where they have a lot of accounts with privileges. They lose control on the security. My name is Arnold Martinez, and today we'll be talking on how you can use privileged identity management to control all the privileged identities in your organization to avoid having the permanent administrators and give them just temporary access. So stay with me. Managing access to privileged accounts securely has been a challenge for organizations. Over time, they discovered that they have too many permanent accounts with high levels of privilege in their environments. Some examples of threats that arise are malicious administrators, administrator credentials filtered through phishing attacks, for example, administrator credentials cached on compromised systems, user accounts that are granted temporary elevated privileges that become permanent. Unfortunately, in most organizations, there is not enough hygiene for privileged accounts. To avoid this, it's important to manage privileged accounts and monitor their activities due to the risk associated with their improper use. This is an area where Azure AD Privileged Identity Management can help. Identity management with Azure AD privileges will help you to discover privileged administrator roles and user accounts to which they are assigned. It will also allow you to revoke permanent privilege access and provide a mechanism that manages on-demand access and limited time for accounts with Azure Active Directory privileges. In this way, you gain the ability to restrict and monitor administrators and their access to resources. Users who need administrative access can obtain it for a limited pre-configured time, which is called just-in-time access, after they have obviously demonstrated their identity using a multi-factor authentication challenge. On this demo, we'll use a user called or named Victor Admin. We name it that way for demo purposes, but this is a regular user, normal users with no global permissions. But this user requires to do some administrative tasks like managing the Azure Information Protection solution. Arnold, who is a global administrator, has previously configured some rules to allow Victor to be a user who can be eligible to become a security administrator of the solution and allowing him to connect and manage the Azure Information Protection solution. So in this demo, So the first step is to sign in with the Victor Admin user. And once the Victor Admin user logs into the Azure portal, he will try to manage the Azure Information Protection solution. And we will see the normal result when a user without any privilege to get access to the solution will get a message when the user tries to manage the solution. Obviously, this user is not an authorized users to get access to the solution. So what does this user needs to do in order to get access and activate or have a high level privileges? So the order, or this user, in this case Victor, needs to go to Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. Under this solution, on this portal, this dashboard, he will see the different roles that he has been assigned, where he can choose to activate his role. The user clicks on My Roles section, and as we see, This user, one role that is allowed to activate is the role of security administrator. It's not active at this time, and what he needs to do is to go through the process of activation. And for that, the user needs only to click on the activate. Obviously, before elevating the privileges for this normal user, it needs to verify its identity. And for doing that, the user Victor needs to click here on verify your identity before proceeding. One of the security measures, or the what you can do with privileged identity management, is allow high privilege access to some normal users, but in order to do that, the user needs to verify the identity using a multi-factor or second factor of authentication. As you will listen here, the Victor admin has already configured the second factor authentication, and he will be receiving a call.
The Microsoft sign-in verification system. Please press the pound key to finish your verification.
We press the pound key.
Sign-in was successfully verified. Goodbye.
Once the Victor has already verified its identity, the user will be able to proceed on the activation process. So the user clicks on activate. Now we have a blue color, the button, which means we have already verified the identity. And we also can specify some custom activation duration time. By default is 1 hour, but you need to provide, for example, one reason. One of the main things that you need to consider is that all of these sections and all these requirements are parameters that are configurable in the roles when the admin or the global admin is creating the roles and assigning the users to be allowed to activate the roles. So for this purpose, we'll express some reason here. One of the things that is important to note here is that once the user clicks the activate button, it will have to go and wait for 3 steps. And one of the things that I want to mention is that the administrator for the privileged identity management solution has the capability to define, for example, the approval process. So if Victor wants to enable or wants to activate the security administrator role, if you are the administrator, you can define or request that the Victor admin needs to request permissions to activate the user. And you can define who will be in charge. For example, it can be the department's administrator, to define and to be the approval, the one who needs to approve the user, in this case Victor request. It will need to approve their access in order to activate the role. Once the user has already passed through the 3 stages, it needs to sign out. Victor needs to sign out from the account in order to log in again with their privilege already activated with the security administrator. Now the Victor user sign in again, and again needs to prove its identity because it now has the security role activated. We follow again the process for a second factor authentication.
Microsoft sign-in verification. Your sign-in was goodbye.
Okay, so once the user Victor has already signed in, he wants to do again to get access to the Azure Information Protection solution to define and see how the configuration for labels and classifications and all of the configuration related to Azure Information Protection is. In this case, the user has access to the solution because he has been assigned, his privilege has been elevated and activated, but this is, as you can see, a temporary access, not a permanent one. Now the user Victor has access to all the configuration here related to Azure Information Protection. From the administrator perspective, you have the capability to all the history, and now the history that allows you to see every time that a user has requested the activation. For example, here the first step for the activation request, and Also, if the user was able to activate, in this case for the Victor admin user, the role that was assigned was the security administrator, and the reason and the expiration, which is the time. Let's remember that the default time that was specified was 1 hour. Additionally, the administrator can get some emails in your inbox, for example, every time that the user has activated the role, like in this case the Victor user, and you will have all the information in your inbox, like the user who activated the role that was activated, the expiration time, and the justification that this user provided at the time that was activating the role. So as you can see in this quick demo, you have a lot of capability if you implement and maximize the potential of the privileged identity management solution. So the permanent admins for the Azure Active Directory roles and Active Directory infrastructure, including Azure resources, you can specify what user will be able to do some administrative task and the time that is allowed for these users to execute some administrative tasks. So as we said at the beginning, you are not giving or providing permanent access to all the administrators or to all the users. You can provide or grant access under approval under your monitoring. You will be able to see all the auditing history, all the actions that were. From this way, you can protect your organization, because every user that has administrative permissions or roles, it's a risk that can be materialized. Sometimes you cannot control what the end user, what the administrators can do. At this time, with this solution, you have that capability.